Hey, amazing viewers, I love connecting with you all around the world. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share will leave you inspired and ready to take control of your own life. In today's story, you'll hear about an incredible twist that no one saw coming. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Dorian Matthews had been making deliveries for almost a decade. Day in and day out, he navigated the bustling streets of downtown Phoenix, a man with a purpose, but always hidden in plain sight. Most people barely noticed him. He was just another face in a uniform, carrying boxes from one place to another. The kind of person people didn't give a second glance to. He was a delivery guy. To them, that was all he was. But Dorian knew better. He knew that behind the worn boots and the delivery scanner clipped to his belt, there was far more than met the eye. One morning, Dorian drove his van into the parking lot of Whitmore & Klein, a high-end marketing firm known for its marble floors and glossy reputation. It was his regular stop, just another delivery for the day. But something about this place always felt different. The employees, with their crisp suits and expensive cologne, always looked at him as if he were a shadow, someone who didn't belong, someone beneath their notice. It was a feeling Dorian had grown used to over the years, and usually it didn't bother him. After all, he had been humiliated before. From the receptionist who barely looked up as she signed for the package, to the staff who pretended he wasn't even in the room. Dorian had learned how to block it all out. He was used to being invisible. But that day, something shifted. As he placed a delivery on the counter, a voice broke through the hum of office chatter, and the words that followed would stick with him forever. "Man, can you imagine if the delivery guy was our boss?" The voice was loud, mocking. Dorian didn't turn around, but he knew exactly who it was. Ryan Caldwell, one of the senior account executives. The man who always wore the most expensive suits, the one who could talk the loudest and laugh the hardest at anyone else's expense, the one who thought the world revolved around him. Laughter followed. It wasn't just Ryan. Others joined in. The women in the office chuckled, adding their own digs. "Please, he's probably used to lifting boxes, not leading meetings," someone added, and the room erupted in laughter once more. Dorian felt the heat rise in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd been the butt of a joke, but something about the way they mocked him, the certainty, the belief that someone like him could never be more than a delivery man, struck a chord deep within him. His throat tightened, but instead of reacting, he kept his face neutral. He finished what he was doing, handed the tablet to the receptionist to sign, and turned toward the door. The whispers and the laughter followed him out, but it wasn't just their words that stung. It was the confidence in their voices, the certainty with which they assumed they were better than him. That feeling was new, and it cut deeper than anything he'd ever experienced before. As he stepped out of the sleek, glass-fronted building and back into the Arizona heat, something inside him began to change. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something sharper, something more profound. He climbed into his delivery van and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel tightly. They thought they knew who he was. They thought he was just another man in a uniform, but they didn't know him. And soon, they would. He started the van's engine, and as the hum of the motor filled the space around him, a thought flashed through his mind. The work he did, delivering packages, carrying boxes, serving as an invisible cog in the corporate machine, wasn't who he was. It wasn't all there was. But for the first time, he realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time for them to see him differently. The laughter at Whitmore & Klein wasn't just disrespect. It was a challenge, and Dorian Matthews had never been one to back down from a challenge. As he drove away, he made a vow to himself. They would see who he really was. They would understand that he wasn't just the delivery guy. He had bigger plans, much bigger plans, and he would show them. It was late one evening when Dorian Matthews realized just how much power a single moment could hold. That moment when the laughter at Whitmore and Klein had echoed in his mind, was no longer a painful sting. It was a turning point, a catalyst for change. What had begun as a casual mockery had ignited a fire inside him that he could no longer ignore. He wasn't just going to let them continue to view him as a delivery man. He was going to prove them wrong. But proving them wrong wouldn't be easy. Dorian had spent years in the shadows, blending into the background of society's expectations. He had always been content, or at least had convinced himself that he was, to do the hard work that nobody else wanted to do. He had never been the center of attention, never the one to stand in front of the room. Yet, deep inside, he knew that there was more to him. He wasn't just a delivery guy. He had always understood the business world, always had a knack for strategy and finance. He just hadn't had the chance to show it. That night, as he sat in his small apartment in Mesa, he picked up the phone and dialed his older brother, Malcolm. Malcolm had always been the one who saw Dorian for who he truly was, the one who believed in his potential even when Dorian couldn't see it himself. It was Malcolm who had taught him how to flip sneakers when they were kids, showing him how to spot a good deal and turn it into profit. It was Malcolm who had encouraged him to start thinking about investments, stocks, and even real estate, long before Dorian ever considered it seriously. "Yo, you good?" Malcolm's voice crackled through the phone, a familiar sound that always made Dorian feel like everything would be okay. "I'm good," Dorian replied, his voice carrying the weight of the day's frustration. "Just had one of those days." "I can tell," Malcolm said with a chuckle. "Let me guess, some rich folks made you feel like you didn't belong." Dorian sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Yeah, it wasn't just that though. It's different today, Malcolm. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being invisible." Malcolm's tone shifted, becoming serious. "Good. Means you're finally tired of it." Dorian blinked, surprised by the response. "What do you mean good?" "I mean good. Means you're finally ready to do something about it," Malcolm said, his voice steady and confident. "You've got more than they think. You've always had more. You've been playing small, Dorian. But now, it's time to play big." Dorian leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as his brother's words sank in. He had always kept his aspirations small, just enough to get by, enough to avoid the ridicule. But deep down, he knew that Malcolm was right. He was capable of so much more. It wasn't about quitting his job or giving up. It was about changing his approach, about taking control of his life instead of letting others control the narrative. "What do I do, Malcolm?" Dorian asked quietly. "How do I even start?" "Remember what Dad used to say?" Malcolm replied. "When people only see you one way, you've got two choices. Prove them right or prove them wrong. Which one you gonna choose?" Dorian exhaled slowly, a small smile creeping onto his face. He had heard that saying 100 times growing up. His father had always said it to him, especially when things seemed difficult, or when the world around him seemed to put him in a box he didn't belong in. Now, Dorian realized it wasn't just a saying. It was the key to everything. "I'm going to prove them wrong," Dorian said with newfound determination. "I'm going to show them that I'm not just the delivery guy." "You've already got what it takes," Malcolm said. "Now it's time to take it to the next level. You've got the strategy, the mind for business. It's time to make them see you for who you really are." Dorian's heart began to race as the weight of his brother's words set in. He had been playing small for too long, stuck in a cycle of being underestimated. It was time for a change. It was time to step into his true potential. The path wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't happen overnight, but Dorian knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Whitmore and Klein, nor anyone else, define who he was. The next morning, Dorian got up early. He didn't go to his usual delivery stops. Instead, he sat down at his desk, pulled out his laptop, and started going through his notes. Financial projections, business strategies, and ideas for startups he had been quietly working on for the past year. He had already been making small moves in the world of business on the side. But now, it was time to take things seriously. Dorian had been analyzing the marketing firm for months, observing their strengths and weaknesses. He'd watched their executives flaunt their suits and expensive offices, assuming they were untouchable. But what they didn't see, what they never bothered to notice, was that their firm was faltering beneath the surface. He had seen the cracks, and he had the expertise to fix them. He had always been good at spotting opportunity, whether it was flipping sneakers or identifying weak business strategies. He had a sharp mind for numbers and a gut instinct for what worked and what didn't. What he needed now was the backing to make it happen, something he had already started to secure. By the end of the week, Dorian had made the call. He reached out to some investors who had previously shown interest in his ideas. They weren't concerned about where he came from or what his day job was. They saw potential in him, a sharp, strategic mind with the ability to turn things around. The meeting went well. The investors were impressed by his analysis of Whitmore and Klein's struggles. They saw the value in Dorian's plan to buy them out, restructure, and bring the company back to profitability. This wasn't just about getting revenge on the people who had mocked him. This was about proving to himself and to the world that he was capable of far more than they ever gave him credit for. The brutal lesson. Months passed since Dorian Matthews had made that call to his brother Malcolm. What once seemed like a far-fetched dream, becoming more than just the delivery guy, was now becoming a reality. Dorian had taken every lesson he learned over the years and applied it to his ultimate goal, turning Whitmore and Klein, the marketing firm that had once mocked him, into his own empire. And it wasn't just about getting back at them. It was about proving to himself and the world that he was far more than what they saw on the surface. Dorian had done everything quietly, strategically. He had bought out shares, negotiated with investors, and secured backing from those who saw the value in his vision. No one at Whitmore and Klein knew what was coming. The same employees who had laughed at the idea of him being in charge had no idea that Dorian Matthews was now their future boss. It wasn't until the day that changed everything that they realized just how much they had underestimated him. It was a crisp morning when Dorian walked through the glass doors of Whitmore and Klein's sleek office once again. But this time, he wasn't carrying a package. He wasn't there to make a delivery. He was there to take control. His steps were measured, his mind focused as he approached the receptionist, the same one who had barely looked at him years ago. She glanced up in surprise, but Dorian didn't wait for her to acknowledge him. He walked past the lobby, past the glass walls that once made him feel invisible, and straight toward the CEO's office. The murmurs started as soon as he passed the executives' desks. People began to notice something was different. Dorian didn't wear a uniform today. He wasn't a delivery man. He was a man in charge. When he reached Richard Langford's office, the CEO was sitting at his desk, clearly irritated, clicking away on his computer. The same man who had laughed when Dorian had been nothing more than a figure to be ignored now sat behind a desk that would soon belong to Dorian. Without hesitation, Dorian knocked once and then walked into the office. Langford barely looked up, but his irritation was palpable. "What is it, Matthews?" he asked dismissively, his tone heavy with indifference. "If this is about another misplaced package." Dorian cut him off with a calm, unwavering voice. "It's about the fact that, as of this morning, I own the majority of Whitmore and Klein." Langford stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he scanned Dorian's face, searching for any sign of a joke. There was none. Slowly, he looked down at the papers in front of him, and his face drained of color. The reality of what was happening hit him like a slap to the face. Dorian wasn't some delivery guy anymore. He was the new owner. "Impossible," Langford muttered under his breath. "It's very possible," Dorian said, his gaze steady, his voice calm. He set down a folder containing all the official documents on Langford's desk. "Check the paperwork yourself." The CEO stood up, shakily flipping through the pages. His face grew pale as the weight of the situation dawned on him. The firm that had once laughed at Dorian, the company that had looked down on him, was now his to command. Dorian wasn't just a part of the corporate world now. He was at the top. And soon, everyone would know that they had made the mistake of underestimating him. Langford, panicked and lost for words, tried to save face. "You can't do this," he said, his voice a little more desperate now. Dorian stood tall, his expression unwavering. "You had a chance to lead this company with integrity, but you didn't. You made decisions based on your ego, while I was quietly watching, learning, and understanding how to make it right. Now this company belongs to me, and you'll need to vacate your office by the end of the day." The reality hit like a tidal wave. Langford's hands trembled as he tried to argue, but his words were meaningless now. Dorian had taken control, and he wasn't looking back. As Dorian walked out of Langford's office, the entire building buzzed with confusion and disbelief. Whispers ran through the hallways. Some employees, like Ryan Caldwell, the same senior account executive who had mocked Dorian for his perceived status, watched in stunned silence as Dorian passed. For the first time in his life, Dorian wasn't invisible. The laughter, the smirks, the mocking, it all faded into the background. Now, he was the one in charge. Dorian walked into the main conference room, where every employee was gathered. Ryan Caldwell, still incredulous, stood at the front, arms crossed, waiting for Dorian to say something. Anything. But Dorian didn't need to say much. He simply looked around the room, his gaze steady. "I'm sure you all have questions," he began, his voice commanding. "Well, let me make it simple. I am your boss now, and I'm here to make changes." Ryan scoffed, still trying to maintain his arrogance. "So what? You walk in here and start throwing your weight around. We're all supposed to fall in line now." Dorian stepped closer to him, his voice low but full of authority. "I've been here longer than you think. I've watched this company fall apart under your leadership. I've seen the mistakes, the waste, and the arrogance. But I also know how to fix it. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure everyone here realizes they're part of a team, not some exclusive club where you think you're untouchable." The tension in the room was palpable. Dorian turned to the rest of the employees, many of whom had been silent observers for too long. "For those of you who are willing to work hard, to adapt and make this company better, you'll have a place here. For those who can't handle the change, well, there's the door." The room fell silent. Ryan stood frozen, unsure of what to do next, and in that moment, everyone in the room realized something. Dorian Matthews wasn't just a delivery guy. He had always been more than that. He was a leader, a businessman, a man who had been underestimated for far too long. So in the end, it's clear that the mockery and the dismissal from the employees at Whitmore and Klein served as the tipping point for Dorian. He wasn't just a man with a delivery job anymore. The confidence, the laughs, and the words of ridicule fueled a fire within him that would soon burn brighter than anyone could have anticipated. This was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The world may have written him off, but Dorian Matthews was far from invisible. And soon, they would know exactly who he was. Dorian Matthews was no longer just a delivery guy. The mockery, the laughter, the dismissiveness, it all fueled his resolve to prove everyone wrong. He had the intelligence, the strategy, and now the resources to make his mark in the business world. He wasn't just going to change his life, he was going to change the course of Whitmore and Klein. And when he did, the people who had laughed at him would learn that they had underestimated the wrong man. Dorian's rise wasn't just a personal victory. It was a lesson for everyone who had ever looked down on him. In the face of mockery and dismissal, he had built his future. He had turned the very thing they had laughed at, the man in the uniform, the invisible worker, into the force that changed their lives. The message was clear. Never underestimate someone based on their position, their background, or their appearance. You never know what they're capable of. Dorian Matthews wasn't just a delivery man. He was a man of vision, resilience, and unwavering determination. And now, the world would know his name.